Welcome, everyone, to this pre-conference webinar. ODR 2026 is a mere, what is it, 8 days away, 7 days away. So we're very, very excited about that. And I thought to whet our appetite, we would have a presentation from two of our close friends who are unfortunately able to join us in person, not able to join us in person next week. But we wanted to give an opportunity for them to share some of the great work that they're doing. So Anna and Francois, thank you so much for making the time today. And your presentation could not be more apt for all the things we plan to talk about next week. And you are our first kickoff presentation, so I think you're going to raise a lot of questions that we will further chew on over the next few days. But thank you so much for joining. And maybe I could, Anna, here's the one task I'm going to assign you. You have to introduce Francois. So I'll hand it to you.
Wow, wow, wow. Okay, hello everybody. Nice to be here with all of you. So Francois is French. He's from Telecom Paris. Now he's doing a PhD with the University of Geneva, the Swiss Center of Effective Science, and then the PhD goes also to Dresden, the University of Dresden. Of course, he has done also the program of negotiation of Harvard. He's a former executive from Philips, Hitachi, Microsoft, Hitit, and now he works in Singapore Management University Executive Education. He's part of the board of the direction of the Institute of Certification and Training of Lusophone Mediators, and he has several certifications around conflict resolution. And so, is it okay, Francois? Can you start with this presentation?
Thank you very much, Anna. Hi, everyone, and thanks for having me. I'm here to speak about the research I'm currently conducting as the ongoing PhD. As Anna very nicely said, actually, I'm not with Geneva anymore because I expired the credit of 4 years that I had at Geneva, and I moved to the University of Dresden with my supervisor. I've been doing the PhD for a lot of time now. At the beginning, I was doing it full time, and then I started having more professional activity. So I've been doing it part time, which, if anyone knows about, is fun. So I'm going to speak about what you see here. I'm going to explain why I'm doing it also. But before that, I'd like to share a bit where I started from in terms of PhD research. I published so far 2 papers, one as a main author. My focus has been from the beginning trying to use as much as possible metrics. And there's a lot of mediation research out there that actually use outcome variables. Funny enough, not that much, actually. There's a lot of mediation research that is more discursive in a sense, narrative, than really measuring things. And the first paper I published was about comparing direct negotiation and mediated sessions in a couple conflict, in a sense, with clear outcome variables. And actually, as I will explain, I'm using the data set that I put together at that time. At that time was 10 years ago, which was video recordings of those conversations. And we did actually a second paper, which is exactly the same protocol, but also studying how the brain is behaving. So you have here the reference of the 2 papers that we published so far. My supervisor, a few words about her, is called Olga Klimecki. She's a fantastic woman. She's now with the University of Innsbruck. She's been very loyal to me and continues supporting me, even though I'm so late regarding my PhD. So what I've tried to tackle in the last couple of months is the following problem, which is basically analyzing mediation at scale. We have, as I said, a couple of studies where we use outcome variables, and we all know from practice that mediator and parties' behaviors and what they say, what they do, predict outcomes. The outcome variables are very variable also across different studies. I'm going to mention several times a very seminal kind of study for me, which is from Charcoudian, based in Maryland. We did a couple of research. The reason why I refer to that research is because I used the code book that the team led by Charcoudian created. But what I also like is that they actually had a better kind of list of outcome variables than what I used, ironically, in 2016 as well, when they did their own research. So the key message also is that to me, I'd be happy to get your feedback and your comments. I would pause at certain moments in my presentation for you to jump in, so don't hesitate to interrupt me, by the way. The reality is that there is no common way of actually looking at count variables in research, in my humble opinion. That makes sense because depending on the mediation kind of mediation that you're doing, conflict, family, commercial, and so on and so forth, yes, the account variables could be different. But I think the common set of account variables could be a good conversation to have. But that's for another kind of session in a sense. So there is research, mostly done in the US, as far as I know. There's a lot of research happening in China right now, clearly, and especially some research probably without me knowing it's using AI those days. The reality of those research is that they've always gone into not trouble, but hit a roadblock in a sense where you need manual coders, you need to train them. You need to make sure that they have inter-coder reliability, which is not easy. In the example of Charcoudian, for instance, she had the first set of coders, then people left the team, so she had to retrain people once they were getting into the team, and it takes a lot of time. And we know that because Anna here is not only my support, but she was also the second coder. I'll come back to that when we started coding manually some of the sessions to have a reference. And it takes, as you can see here, 90 to 240 minutes per session of roughly, I would say, 60 minutes maximum, which is absolutely not scalable. So the question was simply, how can we use technology to try to address that? On top of that, there are a couple of other issues, and I can assure you, and I would love to get your feedback on that, or even your contribution, is that as I am looking for more data sets, and I will explain why in a while, clearly confidentiality is often a roadblock for to collect data. I believe that it's maybe self-limitation in many cases. I'm not so sure that parties would always object to recording, as long as you have a strong IRB behind you that makes sure that you anonymize everything and you never disclose the name of the parties in the case of a real conflict. In my data set, it's a recurring topic of disagreement in the couple that was discussed. So it's not a pure conflict in a sense. We created conflict between the couples, asking them what is the highest topic of recurring disagreement. But in the case of a real conflict, we know that some parties might object. So data sets are scarce. And I think one of the key maybe objective we could have as a community is to try to enlarge the data set. And clearly, online mediation is the perfect field for that, because we not only have natively video and audio, but we also have the speaker name, which is clearly identified, which is a mess when you use face-to-face mediation, because it's not always easy to detect if you have recorded and if you have nobody who has transcribed the session and noted down the name of the speaker. And sometimes there may be a confusion even with the mediator. As I said, coding is time intensive, hard to replicate, and hard to have reliability. And so we have the knowledge there, not that much. We have the data, but we probably also lacking the scale. So that's the idea that I had at the beginning of my research. So our approach, I'm not the only one. I have a research assistant working with me. It's been very helpful, especially at the beginning, and is helpful in looking at where I'm at. It's been very helpful at the beginning when I was not vibe coding with GenAI, and I decided to vibe code because I didn't want to be stuck in a sense, and I wanted to be in control of the pipeline. So we have those 19 transcripts from my research in 2016. Average duration is 60 minutes. There is clearly most of those most of the sessions reach an agreement, which is a problem for future research, because I would also like to have sessions where there is disagreement at the end compared to agreement. Those sessions mostly reach agreement according to the perspective of the parties. I'm not so sure they all reach an agreement, but that's what they thought at the end, thanks to the beautiful work done by the mediator. One key part of any research, and I don't know how much you know about how to apply GenAI to sessions, and bear with me if you already know all of that. I apologize. One of the things that are very clear is that it's it's very risky to not chunk down the different transcripts. So I'm using only the written transcription. I am not into multi-mode for now. I transcribe all the sessions with the highest degree of fidelity. And then you can't actually build a pipeline, in my opinion, if you do not chunk it down to avoid drift. The good duration of the chunks is 45 turns. That's where I ended up choosing. So all the different transcripts are chunked down into 45 turns. So you can imagine, depending on duration, you have up to 13, 14 chunks. And then, and that's the core thing, the LLM coding is here clearly to map between the code book that I have from Charcoudian, the researcher I talked about, map that code book to the different sessions and detect and code every single turn. On the one hand, from the mediator. So the code book has a very detailed list of 21, as far as I remember, 21 types of interventions from the mediator, and also codes for participants. The problem that we face when you try to use GenAI in that kind of context is clearly you have to put the little devil into a nice box so that it doesn't drift, it doesn't hallucinate, and it consistently produces the same kind of outcome. And we know that it's not necessary what GenAI is good at, but actually with the good combination of codes around the LLM and of course a prompt, which has been the most difficult thing to develop, which is listing additional rules compared to the codebook in order to replicate what you and me could do if we were transcribing, looking at the codebook and say, oh, this is more like empathy, or this is more like an open question, and so on and so forth. By iteration, try on error, creating rules that are applied so that there is a consistent way of coding. And I come back to that clearly also reliably similar in the best possible way with what human beings would be doing. Then the next part is clearly validation. So once you have done that coding inside the pipeline, there is a moment where there is a validation, a check. Everything is actually auditable. So every decision made by the pipeline is being recorded. This is a domain where we're tweaking right now because, funny enough, oh, by the way, I'm using OpenAI. That's a historical decision. I didn't start with Anthropic. I stick to OpenAI APIs. The funny thing is that the audit is very good, but sometimes the OpenAI, the LLM, is able to make the right decision in terms of coding, but the excuse, because it's not a real argument, the justification is not necessarily completely right. So we're trying to fix that right now. Without getting into the details, that's one of the things that happened. But generally speaking, and I'll come back to that, we've been able to realize that it's very good in terms of quality. So the validation audit shows that the quality is there. And then, of course, we aggregate the two. So on one hand, we have the coding by the mediator. And without getting into too much details, I'll have a slide about that. But we actually use the coding by of the mediator actions in order to code before coding the participants' actions for multiple reasons. So we do it sequentially right now. So first run with the mediators, then second run with the parties. But of course, you could put that in parallel, okay, with a bit of lag between the two. I'm going to give you the time that it takes in a few seconds, but it would decrease the time of processing and coding. Okay? Am I being clear so far? I'm not looking at you that much, but if you have any question, please don't hesitate to stop me again. I'm seeing the chat window right now that I didn't open. Any questions so far? Am I talking not too fast?
No, not too fast. This is fascinating.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now let's get into the details of what we code. So I mentioned a bit about that already. So we have a couple of codes, I said 21. They are split by strategies. So we are getting into details. Once again, I didn't mention, but I have the paper that I'm going to submit hopefully soon enough we're targeting behavior research method. I don't know if it will go through, but at least we'll try. The different codes have been clustered by Charcutian into the first three, if I remember correctly, the three strategies that you see here. Actually, I want to refer to your original research in order to focus on validity here. She did not define exactly in the same way in the two others. Those are my words, in a sense. Why is that important? You will see that very quickly. It's because clearly, if you stay at the code level, your reliability might not be as good as if you elevate that at the strategy level. And at the end of the day, maybe my belief reinforced by the data, so I swear I didn't make any assumption before, is that the strategy was more important than the coding per se, and more precisely, the interaction clearly between the behaviors of the mediator and the behaviors of the party was even more important than just the interventions of the mediator. So we have strategies on the mediator side, and on the participant behavior side, we have a couple of codes. I'm sorry I put the abbreviations here. I can tell you, for instance, that PS is solutions proposal, AS is accepting a solution, CA is, if I remember, care, empathy, NWF is needs, wants, feeling. Makes sense, okay? When you are not in the option generation mode, but you are more expressing your needs, your emotions also, and so on and so forth. So we divided those participant behaviors, as you can see, in two key categories. And this is also, for me, a connection to another part of the research that I used in the initial stage, where I ask all of those participants to fill out the conflict dynamic profile, which is one of the tools available out there to try to assess the kind of responses that the people have in situations of conflict. And guess what? The two categories of behaviors in that assessment are the constructive behaviors and the destructive behaviors. So rather than naming them destructive for that research, I use the word adversarial. And so the idea is probably at one point in time to try to see with a bigger sample, and come back to that, if there's a correlation between what is declared by the parties and what they actually use in situations of tensions or conflict. So those are the two coding books, in a sense. A very important notion is that all those coding books, and that's why I like them, have been written with a title, so that's the name of the behavior, and header 2 levels in the Word document, very critical for the use in the LLM. And we always ask the LLM to find the level 2 descriptor. Okay, so you can't, for instance, say that the mediator is brainstorming if they're not one of the, I don't know how many, I don't recall by heart, and I have the code book in front of me, but probably 13 examples, subclusters of behaviors. And the LLM has to find that in order to justify its choice. Okay, like in a sense a human being would be doing. So of course, the beauty of it is we get very much quickly tied trying to figure out exactly what's the right code. The LLM may have another problem, which is drifting, but it doesn't get tied in the same way. Now, I'm going to share a bit more about the multipass architecture that I use for participants. It's very similar for mediators. Very quick comment on all of that. I will make the whole materials available in the when publishing for peer review, obviously. Very happy to have conversation with any of you who would be interested in reusing, extending, and so on and so forth, validating again what I'm doing. The different passes here, if you can think about it, are basically being scripted in Python. So that's what I do in Python, and then it calls the LLM at some of the stages. So that's basically how it works. So pass one is for participants. Long story short, it was important, even though I'm not really using it. There are interruptions that can be coded. You can see those interruptions in the transcripts in a rather unified way. So one hypothesis was maybe the level of interruptions, the number of interruptions, who's interrupting who, may be a predictor of something. So that's why we decided to code it. But we realized it was important to separate that from the other codes. So that first pass, going through the interruptions. And then, importantly also, I decided to use some triggers from the mediator to decide if the conversation was getting into what I was calling a solution space, versus staying in the needs, wants, feeling expression, okay? In order to avoid false positive of the codes from the participants who are about solution creation. Because this is where the LLM fails, I think quite easily still today, when there is context, the LLM struggles sometimes to identify if the party is really creating a solution, is really building on the previous turns of the other parties of the mediator, and without a kind of trigger signaling that we're in the solution space, I had too many false positives. So that's why we decided to do it that way. Then in the second pass, we went through all the solution reactions, like, as I said, proposing, accepting, rejecting a solution. And then in the third pass, we first go to solution reaction, then to solution proposal. I won't get into details about that. And then we code the rest of the remaining behaviors. I'm giving you that idea just to share that actually, if you do not sequentially try to control the work of the LLM, you may end up with, once again, a high false positive, and also some false negative. All right, so that's a very rapid description. You get more details into the paper in the future. Now, what is the core objective? Was to achieve reproducibility, okay? And I explained a bit more what it is. It means that if I do first run with one AI session and I do the same coding again with AI, I want to have close to 1.0 in terms of coherence kappa, in terms of intercodal reliability. So in order to do that, clearly we had to use those different passes that I mentioned. So how do we control that? First of all, clearly, predefined codebook. It was not that easy to make sure that the LLM was not all of a sudden deciding to invent new codes, even when we're telling the LLM, my dear, please stick to the header 2 descriptions that you have in the document. So that's something that you actually have to do through your code. As I said, additional admissibility gates are also critical, not leaving it up fully to the codebook to actually let the LLM decide if it can select one code or the other. And so when there's a doubt based on those rules, to not code. Clearly, as I said, justification, because I have 2 columns in my output files. One saying, okay, this is justification, this is why I use this code. And the second one is ambiguity. Ambiguity sometimes appears, but actually one of the good signs also probably of intercodal reliability when ambiguity is low according to the LLM. As I said, this validation that is embedded into the code before you merge the chunked terms of the mediator and the parties, and everything is fixed. It's always in the same way, obviously. The temperature that is being used, the prompt is always re-injected for every turn. So the way that the script is working is that basically when it processes one chunk, it sends to the LLM the codebook, the prompt, and the chunk. Every time it's being repeated that way so that you, in a sense, once again, try to make it reliable. All right, so a bit of results. And this is really, once again, AI. Okay, I'm going to come to AI human and human. A kappa of 0.79 is not that bad in a sense. More interesting, I would say, is the payback. And clearly, what did we have to use the payback? Because the payback is necessary here for 2 reasons. First of all, you have some categories that are not frequently chosen by the mediator for obvious reasons, okay? And those low frequency codes may actually impact the kappa. And there are also before the code of behavior, some codes that are not present in those sessions. And this is where it's interesting to note that, unfortunately, as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, my data set is limited because it's not real mediation sessions. And I've just received from a US scholar a new set of data. I'm craving for new data set. If you know anyone who has a data set that could be shared with me, please contact me, because I want to make sure that not only the pipeline is reused and validated with other data sets, but also I want to have a data set that is the platform for the use of most of the codes. And today, clearly, some of the codes are not necessarily used. because just to give you an example, in those conversations, you do not have a lot of time dedicated to solution reformulation or summary, because they are not really mediation sessions, as I said. And clearly in a mediation session, you may have that, and then there are codes associated with that, especially from the mediator, that will be present in those sessions. Anyway, good kappa, not only for the mediator agreement, but also, as you can see, for the participant coding, constructive and adversarial. Constructive is actually higher than adversarial for a very simple reason. Once again, you go back to the prevalence of those codes. Fortunately, people we had in the room were not that adversarial, so not a lot of presence of those codes. And on the right, you see by category with the column, you have the payback, and on the other side, you have the coherence kappa. So it's not fantastic, but it's quite good. That's my interpretation. I'm going to pause here. Do you have any question, comments?
No, this looks great. I want to see it in action.
Can I just ask?
It's not part of my demo, Colin, but I'd love to be able to do a demo to all of you later on. Yes.
Can I just ask
please.
the AI agreement? Does that mean that you fed the same data into the same AI, again using the same script to see if it would spit out the same results, or
Absolutely.
some other AI? Yeah. Okay.
No. It's AI with the same model, same API. I did not get into, and maybe that's something I need to do before publishing. I was tempted to use OpenAI on one side and Anthropic on the other side, and I don't know if it's going to create a lot of difference anyway. But yes, it's exactly that. So making sure that it's actually, and I've actually done it 3 times just to check that it was still. So on that side, it's pretty reliable. Now the question is my next slide, which is basically how does it compare to human? And I come back to that. But yeah, it's really same conditions, same AI. Any other question? Nope. Okay. Human coders. Full disclosure, as I mentioned, I'm one of the human coders. Clearly, that's a flaw in terms of design. Even though I have to say, it is so painful to memorize the bloody code book that I can swear to all of you here that I'm not so sure that that's actually a problem. But in a sense, still, I was one of the coders, and I was the other coder. At one point in time, we tried to involve another person. It was quite difficult to find someone. By the way, all those sessions are in French for most of them. Only one is in English. So that's the reason why we need to be able. Oh yes, I forgot to say this is multilingual, by the way, in case you did not guess yet. Okay, that's to say the code book can be in English, it can be in French. I've not gone into the proof of the fact that it could be fully multilingual, but we all know that's the beauty of LLM. You can actually apply that tomorrow, and I started doing that, for instance, in Portuguese language. So what you see here, you see for the mediators, because I did not get into AI to human coder or human to human interoperability with the parties. Because I was lazy, and also because, as I mentioned, it's not being lazy, it's just that it's so time consuming and not necessarily useful, in my humble opinion, that we decided to stick to mediator. So you can see here human to human, which by the way is low. But let's be very clear, when you look at different categories, and some of them are super low in a sense, that shows that it's very hard to two human coders who have not been doing that repeatedly for several sessions to get to a proper level of agreement. AI to human, AG, full disclosure, is Anna here. FB, it's me. You can see also here that clearly, because they do not agree together, the agreement is not necessarily very high between the AI and the coders. And as I mentioned, for the AI, it's quite high. So is that a limit? Well, my take is the following one, and I want to have more data sets to be able to prove that, is that at the end of the day, I'm going to be a bit provocative here and a bit extreme maybe. If the AI is doing a better job than humans, and I'm not saying it's not the case, or I'm not saying it's the case, but if AI is doing a better job than human, at the end of the day, to me, the reproducibility, the fact that the pipeline is actually stable, is more important to me than what I have right now. Now, second message is that I tweaked over and over again the rules, the prompt. I don't know how many versions of the prompt I went through of the code in order to not create false positive and reduce as much as possible false negative. Okay, And there's a moment where your efforts, and that's probably something which is common, reaches a plateau. And you basically try to tweak again and again, and you realize that the LM is never going to be exactly doing what the human being is doing. And I think we should live with that. My core message is that as long as for the key categories that are instrumental to the outcome of the mediation, we have a reasonable and decent kind of feedback, we should be pretty happy. The third argument, and that's where I will come, is that at the end of the day, all of that also creates a very rich data set that you would never be able to have, I think, with human coding, because you can have indices that I'm going to share with you very rapidly, and you can actually scale the research in a way that you would never be able to do with a human being. So I'm not denying the fact that that reliability is important. I'm just saying it's not as important as what you can do now with the pipeline that you have shown to be reproducible. And that's my core message. So manual coding, 90 to 240 minutes, depending if you had a good coffee, if you've not been tired, if you've been trained properly for a human being. Coding a session exactly the same duration is in the current setup with a sequential first mediator and then the parties around 17 minutes. Okay. If you lag it, as I said, you're going to go down to probably 5-10 minutes. If you do it real time, which is absolutely possible for some of the codes, of course, you get into the AI companion kind of approach. And this is, for me, very precious in terms of added value in the mediation field. And I come back to my perspective on the possible applications of that kind of stuff. In terms of tokens, funny enough, it's not expensive. It makes sense. There's not so much content being shared by the parties during the kind of session. So there's not so many tokens being used in input and output. So just to give you a sense, I spent around $50 putting aside all the preparation of the prompts, and when I run the pipeline for the 19 transcripts, $50 US dollars only, which is super cheap, obviously. So there's clearly also an upside in using the pipeline in that way. Now, the most important part for me is the next stage. So yes, I'm very much focused on showing the validity of the whole approach. That's absolutely critical. But now, what can we do with that? And yeah, there's lots of things that can be done. First of all, clearly, one of the core focus areas is the mediator style. I'm not getting into the facilitative evaluative because that Charkoudian doesn't actually dwell a lot on that. Charkoudian showed that some of the strategies were eliciting more short-term or long-term positive outcomes. So there's a lot to be done just with the coding of the mediator behaviors. Of course, not only the pure results, but also the timeline, okay? And the synchronicity or whatever between the mediator and the party. So we have not only the strategies in terms of indices, but we have also something called the responsiveness index, compared to the parties. We have the different kind of shift in terms of phases in mediation that you can calculate. On the party dynamics, clearly constructive adversarial rate is important, the ratio between the two. We've also a de-escalation ratio, a withdrawal rate that could be calculated. The option generation, very interesting thing. So I have another pipeline, an extension of the pipeline that actually focuses on are we converging? Are we diverging? Are we integrating the different options? How many options have been generated in the session, and so on and so forth? And also the shift between the needs, wants, field space and the resolution space that you can also look on the timeline of the code. And last but not least, all the process patterns we could inject, but not relevant for those transcripts. The phases of mediation without any problem. But for now, we have the share of the time of the turns between the two. Those are heterosexual couples, so man, woman, and the mediator. Emotional disclosure slope, I won't get into details in that. And the rate of joint options, where there was engagement from both parties, the level of acknowledgement, and of course, the session duration. So the pipeline is able to create custom indices, obviously. Okay, you have the core codes, and you can decide based on that then to process all of that accordingly. And also, because all of that is being done in Python, you can also decide, to change your statistical calculation very easily, iterate, and so on and so forth. Okay, I'm almost done. So what's the potential implication of that kind of stuff? Clearly, scale at low cost, Second of all, being completely transparent in terms of, it's all auditable, as I mentioned. It is cross-lingual by design. As I said, I already experienced it because I have, once again, some of the, very few, but some of them are in English. You can think about extending that to other domains. I thought at one point in time to also approach using the code, a mix of the two code books, some behaviors from the mediator and all the behaviors from the parties, to apply that to my other set of data from direct negotiation, try to see what was happening there. That's absolutely feasible. Psychotherapy is a bit extreme, but generally speaking, applicable to all kinds of non-facilitated negotiation, and potentially also organizational communication in terms of teams, for instance, teams conversations. Okay, I mentioned the fact that you can connect the behaviors of the parties of mediator to outcomes. And yes, you can iterate on coding schemes. You can replace the coding scheme that I'm using today by a new version that you think is better, and your pipeline stays virtually almost the same. There will be some tweaking, clearly, about the gates, the rules that you have in the prompt, but it allows for also rapid iteration of all of that. If you're not happy with the coding book because it does not relate well to the domain of mediation you are studying, you can quite easily change that in the pipeline. All right, limitations. Clearly, the AI human was done on only 3 transcripts. I only have 19, so that limits dramatically the ability to do that beyond the fact that we were lazy. So it's not fully, it's not perfect in terms of validation. I did the pipeline calibration, and I was also a human coder. So clearly, I don't think that impacts in any way the work that I've been doing, but that can be something that would be noted by a peer reviewer. The payback is here to correct also the low prevalence codes that we have in the whole data set. Yeah, so maybe multi-level analysis would be right, but once again, with the data set of 19 recording, I'm not going very, very far. I'm aware of that. And the fact that it's only 19 sessions is only exploratory. So I position all of that with all of you, even though I'm very happy about it and excited, as really a sort of proof of concept. I'm not pretending that it's fully can be scaled immediately and transformed into an AI companion. I don't think we're there yet, in a sense. So future direction, as I said, I'd like to be able to apply that to bigger and different kind of mediation data sets. Or other analyses have to be done that I've not been able to do because of the limits of the current configuration. And of course, multimodal. So multimodal is possible, as we all know. I actually started, ironically, 10 years ago by trying to process all the videos for facial expressions with one software available at that time. But before that, I think that audio, prosody, I also used physiological data at one point in time. Absolutely not reliable, but at least prosody and probably facial expression could be also an interesting addition to the whole data set. And we know it's now becoming possible at a low cost, which was not the case, once again, 10 years ago. And last but not least, yes, if really some people are picky, we could replicate all of that with independent human coders, so that that are disconnected from the pipeline development, as I was, if we want to have better reliability in a sense. But one thing, I'm not so sure this is so critical. So I'm going to skip that. I've already mentioned that, all of that, the key takeaways. I hope you get the core messages here. And in terms of application, so where I see it is that clearly for mediation training, that could be useful. And one thing, I'm not saying that you are going to get rid of any kind of supervision, any kind of feedback, human feedback. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it can be a kind of low-cost, high-quality companion for most of the applications here. That's what I sense. Okay, and once again, it's not only a proof of concept, so it's just a pure belief, maybe, or intuition. Supervision, clearly, you record yourself on your, with the agreement of the parties, of course, on Zoom or other kind of online platform. You can then have a debrief at the end. I'm actually working right now on a written debrief based on all the indices that I could immediately use. So clearly, supervision, self-supervision can be quite a good application. You can actually compare, you can assess programs in terms of training or use of mediation. Clearly, having much more research on outcomes, okay? What are the predictors, or what's the relationship with some specific outcomes, and what the parties and mediators are doing in mediation? We have the ability to tweak, once again, those parameters and run a pipeline quite easily. We can also replicate across other contexts, as I mentioned. Commercial is one key interesting domain, I think, that could be studied. And last but not least, clearly, that what I had in mind at the beginning is, can we transform that into an AI companion for mediators? That's the key question that I hope to be able to look out for. I'm done.
Wow, amazing. Thank you so much, Francois. This is incredible research. And in the chat, we're coming up with lots and lots of things that we want to talk to you about. But why don't I go to Leah first? Leah, you want to phrase your question by voice?
Sure. Thank you so much, Francois. Very stimulating. You don't seem at all lazy to me. Seems like you only have a certain amount of time and you've done quite a lot with it.
I think you need to make Leah your PhD advisor, because she just
Oh,
give it
no,
to you
no,
right
no.
now.
Oh, Leah, I would love to have you as a PhD, but I like my mind.
You're too kind. It looks like you're off and rolling. I look forward to the publications. So I wondered what kind of benefits you see to being able to use AI to code for facial expressions. Like you're helping us expand the kind of tools that can help us understand each other, understand the conflicts better. So how do you see AI adding to that? Like what kind of benefits, and simultaneously or relatedly, what about the kind of limitations or risks? Because we have individual ways we handle facial expressions, but also there are different cultural norms about facial expressions in some places. So what have you thought about that?
So my thoughts about that. So let me tell you what we were discussing with my first PhD supervisor 10 years ago, who's a guy coming from a computing space, and he was one of the leaders in affective sciences, okay, at that time. The idea was to say, you know what, if we had a little glass globe on the table of the mediator, changing colors depending on how the conversation is going, that would be fantastic, okay? That was 10 years ago. The reason why I'm mentioning that is that one thing that we all know is that when you are engaged into your conduct of mediation, of course, we are all trying to be multi-partial and looking at both or multiple parties in the case when you have the lawyers in the room. But we also know we can't do that as a human being. I mean, I don't know about you, but I can't keep my one eye on one party and the other eye on the other party, clearly. So that is where the AI companion gets into play. It's not replacing your work as a mediator, but it's giving you some additional signals. And human expression, human facial expression, to me, is just one stream of data. I would never limit any kind of decision based clearly on facial expressions. But once you have a pipeline that you have actually fine-tuned, that tells you when you have the combination of those facial expressions with something which is being said or done, that probably could lead to X, you're in a better place as a mediator to actually be more attuned to what's happening. So I see that as a co-pilot for the, I hate that word, by the way, but as a maybe co-mediator, and that's a bit extreme, I'm aware of that, but I would not isolate facial expression per se. I would just say they are reinforcement. And one of the second things I wanted to say is that the reason why I'm so happy that I'm being stuck with pure language is because I also believe that language is much more powerful sometimes than what we may believe. And we may tend to say, oh, you know, it's very important that you also process in your brain all the other signals that receive nonverbal communication. But at the end of the day, the primary, sorry, for lack of a better word, the primary added value of the mediator is the process, the way that they behave, and what they trigger in terms of verbal behaviors, because we are talking, we're not just facing each other. So that's my answer to your question, a very long answer to your question. I think it's just one stream of data, but I think it's quite reliable because going back to your point about cultures, in some cultures, it's going to be silence or another form of expression than silence, but something that would be a lack of word. And then, of course, in the multimodal approach, other parts of the data might be more relevant. So I would approach it really in a multimodal way and not overestimating the contribution of facial expressions compared to the rest.
Thank you for that. And just a couple of reflections back. You don't need to respond if you don't want to, but a couple of reflections back. One, I mean, I appreciate your saying it would be one avenue, and it reminds me of the power of training, because as we have a generation that's becoming more and more familiar, for better and for worse, of incorporating AI in most things that they do, then we could become defaulting to thinking it is more important than we wish it to be. And so I'm just thinking
Yeah.
about the value around training and the other and keeping that spirit of focusing on the human judgment in the end. That's one thing. The other thing is I was thinking about how AI still has a ways to go regarding skin color, just as an example, and what it reads and what it misreads. So that sticks out. The other thing is you remind me of mood rings. If we could think back to the 70s. And
Yeah.
so maybe we need
Yeah.
mediator mood rings.
Mediator mood rings. I love that. That's a great way
Yeah.
to
Well,
commercialize it.
yeah, I agree with everything that you said, Leah. And by the way, I have a very ambivalent kind of relationship with AI. I do believe, I don't know, there's a whole field of research. You know that better than I do probably, but that's also the other part of me, SMU, that is about, we are at a place where people start relying, including very smart people, and all mediators are probably smarter than the average. I'm sorry, it's my belief and bias. Very smart people that start relying, even smart people, too much on AI. That's absolutely clear. So I think that there's a very, very fine line that we have to walk where we give additional tools and we still make sure that the actor, who's the mediator, is the one who's going to make the decision. That is also something which is critical, and it's very, very tempting to actually rely too much on that. I think that's also a bit what you said. I'm very, very much aware of that, and I think that's a very important thing.
Well, and I want to build off what you just said, Francois, in terms of my comments. I think AI is very powerful. You can give it information and it will generate back insight. You say, wow, that would have been hard for me to glean that same insight from that data set. But the replicability is a real challenge with AI. You can give it the same data set and it'll give you three different answers. So it undermines confidence in output. And I think what you're doing here is you're creating a structure here, and that's what the K values show, is you get replicability in this mechanism. And I think that's going to be something that's very important for us to figure out if AI is going to step into the mediator's chair,
Yeah.
at some point later. Please respond to that, and then I have a
I was
follow-up.
going to say one thing. I wanted to say that because of my other job in the executive development space, I'm in contact with several companies who are doing very similar kind of work, but not in the same application space. And we all converge to the same story, which is basically that, of course, what you just said, Colin, is that if you use Claude or any kind of more sophisticated model that you have, whatever the one you prefer, okay, and you try to do what I'm doing, you're going to get exactly what you have. Very low reproducibility, because by itself, the LM is not able to be, it's it is what it is. So it's never going to be deterministic. But if you find the right way, and I have to say, proof of concept. So it's a bit of a do-it-yourself in a way, okay? But there are ways of doing that. And there's, for instance, a partner that we have, which is right now working on processing massive amount of data in that case for summarized sustainability report studying, okay? And he hit exactly the same roadblocks. So he has a full team. He's lucky he's not a PhD student, dedicated to actually creating that kind of a reproducible pipeline. So it's a common problem of different industries, not only mediation. But clearly, if you leave it up to the LLM, you're not going anywhere, except what you just said, which is, it's probably right. And then 2 minutes after, it's going to give you exactly the opposite, exactly the same kind of intervention and mediator. So that's not reliable. And that's one of the challenges. But I think it will change, and I think it will be more, there will be more and more products available that will be actually, but you can't solve the deep problem of LLM. It's flawed by design to try to do something which is deterministic. So
I completely agree with you, Francois. And I remember when I was at PayPal, we would get complaints from users when we were resolving disputes where they would submit 3 similar kinds of disputes and they would get 3 different outcomes. And they sent me a cartoon one time and it showed PayPal resolution department. There was a door with that on the door and it was cracked open. And when you look through the door, it was just a bunch of monkeys with darts, throwing at balloons. And they said, look, if I submit 3 disputes that look exactly the same and I get 3 different outcomes, then I realize this whole process is just rolling the dice. And then I have no confidence in it. It doesn't matter how much sophistication there is on the back end. If I don't get the reproducibility, then I don't have the confidence in the outcome. Because if I file it at 1 p.m. on Wednesday, I get one outcome. If I file it at 2 p.m. on Wednesday, I get a different outcome. So that is something, and there are many companies now that are working to try and solve that reproducibility challenge, particularly in the arbitration side. I mean, the thing I like about mediation is you always have human in the loop, so they control the outcome. So the thing about LLMs, it's about language, it's about sentiment. It's about a lot of the things that I think your mechanism is testing. There are ways that you can use machine learning to go through a decision tree, and it will create high level of reproducibility. Then you can hand it to an LLM, and then it'll write up the agreement. But if you say to a neural network that's predicting an outcome based on each word, it doesn't have any framework that it brings to each case. So there's no way for it to consider consistency. So I think your mechanism can help to deliver, that this research is generating some of the consistency, and maybe it could be married to an LLM on the back end for the last mile in terms of packaging in a way that maximizes party understanding. But the comment I wanted to make before I hand it to Dan, I have a very good friend, Dave Orr, who's now the head of ethics at Claude, but he was at Google for a long time, and he was doing translation, AI-powered translation. And he had a team of 26 PhDs in linguistics, and they were coding sentences and going through and saying, well, this is the subject, this is the predicate, this is these phrases. And they coded language, full time for years to try and train the translation algorithm that Google had. And then Google was the one who released the Transformer paper that led to the creation of ChatGPT and all of these LLMs. And he gave the same data sets that he was giving to these PhDs in linguistics to the Transformer, and it did a better job. And this is like ChatGPT 2, Then it turned into 3, and then it turned into 4. So he threw out all of that coding research that Google paid millions of dollars for because he found that AI could do it better. Now, again, that's very different than a mediation. Translation is a very different challenge than a mediation because it's all in the language, it's all in the meaning. But I think this coding mechanism, to me, it seems very work intensive, and I can only speak as a practitioner. I'm not a researcher. So, I can see if you have 1,000 mediation transcripts and you really need to do deep analysis, your mechanism is absolutely invaluable. But from the standpoint of the globe that you were talking about on the table that would glow one direction or the other in real time to give feedback to the parties, I mean, I think what you talked about, and I wrote them all down, share of time and turns, emotional disclosure, constructive versus adversarial tone, acceptance versus resistance, to have a real-time bot, like a fairy godmother that's floating over the session and saying, hey, you realize you're kind of dominating the conversation here, or, you're exhibiting a lot of resistance to these ideas, maybe even in caucus, like it could be a private thing to the parties. I've seen this in Zoom now. They have AIs that will monitor people's voice tone and facial expressions and then give real-time dashboards that indicate, well, this party's very resistant, this party's very accepting, controlling all these signals. I think it's inevitable that people are going to utilize these tools. But I think your tool, because it's very focused on language and it's also focused at least on transcript analysis, maybe it's better for the post-analysis of lots of cases than it is as a framework for that real-time evaluation. So I wanted you to react to that.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Well, once again, I'm only doing research here to finish my bloody PhD coding.
I understand. And you've been doing it for a long time before these tools existed. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to get rid of it. Now, so I'm sure that, people like Zoom or other who are in contact with data much more can find better ways of using it. And I do believe that it's already something out there that's probably available, will be available. By the way, one of the major problems that we have in our field of mediation is that it's such a tiny market. So, it's much more interesting to go to much larger markets for commercial providers. But at the end of the day, only doing
it's a blessing and a curse, by the way, but you're correct, 100%. Yeah.
No, I think that this is going to be available. There's no question. I have no doubt that, a software company at one point in time, if they're not already doing it, are going to extend what is already being done in that. But in the field of mediation, I'm not so sure, because once again, it's not a big market. I'm sorry.
It's very specialized. Yeah.
Yeah, very specialized. So we'll see.
Dan, what did you want to say?
Yeah, a very low-level comment or question, actually. You talk about the human being still in the loop, et cetera, and the human being responsible. Well, we're beginning to see mediation bots. So there's not a human in the loop, where there is actually a bot that's conducting the mediation. I just wondered if you had thought about using the system that you're developing to evaluate the efficacy of those systems as opposed to a human mediator.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, well, once again, it's absolutely usable because you will have the transcript natively. I mean, more than the transcript of those sessions, obviously. So it will be very interesting to have a data set based on the kind of intervention. And I don't know if it's already out there, but it's a potential extension of the use of the pipeline. So if people who are using, in real, not necessarily in real settings, but I believe collecting data of the use of that kind of bot with real conversations, I'd be very happy to see how we can adapt use the pipeline to process and see what gets out of it. That's clearly something interesting.
Well,
Well,
my assumption is that the developers of the mediation bots are running God knows how many simulated mediation sessions to see how
Yeah.
their bot is performing. So there's probably a data set that's out there that you could play around with.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. By the way, something I didn't mention, there are so many simulations out there. I did not want to get into simulated sessions, because I don't think it's as good as real sessions. So that when I say there's very few data sets, I want to stick to real mediations. That's my take. But for the focus of improving, probably simulation could be useful. By the way, we have at ICFML in the Institute for Portuguese speaking. We have lots of simulated sessions in Portuguese coming from certification sessions that I've also started looking at. But it's interesting that the mediation bot. Unfortunately, it exists. Fortunately, because once again, today's we're very far from, I think, having the reliability and the quality. But anyway, maybe I'm wrong.
Well,
have you tested that?
Which have we tested?
The mediation bots. Have you been able to test them and assess the quality?
Well, I'll send you over some of the videos we've recorded, because there's many platforms that are cropping up now. Every day, people are contacting me. They're creating AI-powered mediation bots. And I just had dinner with the team from Dispute.ai the other day. They'd be very interested in your framework, not only because they need good data, but they want to train their bot to be better and better. And I almost think that the data that you're generating would be more easily consumed by an AI attempting to be a mediator than a human, who's in the room trying to, like react to the parties, and they can't keep track of all of the advice, that your algorithm is spilling out. So you should definitely talk. I put a couple of them into the chat.
Okay.
And actually, the Mediator.ai is based in Montreal, so they might be interested particularly in your French simulations. The one last comment, I mean, I would talk about this all night, and I know we've exhausted our hour. If anyone has any other comments, but I think from a certification perspective, it sounds like you're already doing that in Portuguese. We have built this Mediator Dojo product, and we're thinking about having an AI certification where we can put new mediators into simulations with AI parties and then do an evaluation of their performance at the end. And it's interesting, the metrics that you choose for evaluating, the session. We've come up with kind of our own rubric for, did the mediator do a good job? But certification has been something we've been wrestling with in the mediation field for decades. How can you effectively say that someone did a good job or they didn't do a good job? And we just don't have enough human energy to go and analyze all of these transcripts or recordings. But AI can certainly do that. And I think and not only is it a training tool where you can give feedback to someone who's a new mediator and say, well, you did this early on, you might want to reconsider that, but also evaluating, hey, is somebody a really top quality mediator, and then giving them a seal that says, they've scored above 90 on this very challenging assessment tool. So I love integrating some of your research into that, François. I think that could be, pardon the pun, transformative around the world in terms of how we educate and certify mediators.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the opportunity to share with you. Thank you very much. And I wish you, I know we're getting at the end, wish you a very good conference in 2 weeks. I hope Anna could go there. I can't because I have a program in the same week anyway.
Pas de problème.
Sure it will be impressive.
You'll be there in spirit. And thank you very much for kicking us off with this excellent presentation. I hope you get your PhD soon.
Well, I hope so. Thank you.
My wife, I applied for a PhD and they rejected me. And my wife said, Colin, look, let me tell you something about you. You don't want to get a PhD. You want to have a PhD. And those are two very different things. And
there are two different things. I want to get my PhD. That's the difference. I don't care about
the
paper.
That's good.
I wanted to get into the journal, and gosh, I did get
then
into
you're
it.
the perfect person to be doing this, because I would be so annoyed as the end zone recedes, as the advisor says, well, I think you need to go back to the beginning. I would tear my hair out. So well done, François. Thank you very much. And Anna, thank you very much.
Everyone.
Yes, this was great. Okay, take care, everyone. And we have another webinar on Monday, if you can join, with Alberto and Graham. So, and that will be our last webinar prior to seeing everyone in Boston next week. So thank you so much for making the time.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.